All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining Audubon Great Lakes and My Birds webinar, Off the Beaten Path, Birding at Michigan's Wetland Wonders this evening. We'll be getting started in just a few minutes. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining Audubon Great Lakes and My Birds webinar, Off the Beaten Path, Birding at Michigan's Wetland Wonders this evening. We're going to be starting in just a few minutes. Please send any questions or comments through the chat box. Feel free to introduce yourself and let us know where you're coming in from. Hi again, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining Audubon Great Lakes and My Birds webinar, Off the Beaten Path, Birding at Michigan's Wetland Wonders. We'll get started in just a couple more minutes, but take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat and where you're joining us from. Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Rowan Ford, and I'll be kicking things off. I want to welcome you all to our webinar with Audubon Great Lakes and My Birds, Off the Beaten Path, Birding at Michigan's Wetland Wonders. in partnership with the Wildlife Division of the Michigan DNR. Thank you for spending the next hour with us. We're hoping this webinar will be helpful because we know the physical and mental health benefits of experiencing nature are so important for all of us. We also know that since COVID-19, people are still spending more time outside and continuing to connect with nature close to home. We're also committed to sharing information about engaging with your local public lands and making the outdoors safe and welcoming for everyone. And with spring here right now, our neotropical migrants and secretive marsh birds are returning to Michigan and the Great Lakes, so it's a great time to get outside and go birding. I'm the conservation manager for Michigan with Audubon Great Lakes, and I manage the My Birds program, which is an outreach and engagement program presented by Michigan DNR's Wildlife Division and Audubon Great Lakes that aims to increase all Michiganders' engagement in the understanding, care, and stewardship of public lands that are important for birds and people. And for those of you that aren't familiar with us, Audubon Great Lakes is a regional office of National Audubon, and we work across the 5 Great Lakes states to restore and protect birds in the places they need to thrive through on-the-ground conservation, as well as outreach and engagement and policy and advocacy. We have over 215,000 active members, over 50 chapters, and 2 nature centers. And our regional office is based out of Chicago. I will be your facilitator today, and with the help of Isabella Grobelna, our engagement manager, and Caitlin Barnes, wildlife biologist with Michigan DNR, who will be monitoring the chat box and will help to facilitate the Q&A session at the end of the program. I apologize if you hear my dog in the background. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This presentation is being recorded, so all participants will be muted for the duration of the webinar. Please take a moment to locate the participant and chat function on the Zoom platform to actively participate in the webinar. I know a lot of us are pretty Zoom competent now after COVID, but if you want to send us a question or comment to the facilitator, please use that chat box. We'll be monitoring the chat box throughout this webinar, so please be respectful and appropriate while participating. We'll review the questions you've submitted in the chat box during the Q&A session. Caitlin might be able to answer some questions live during the webinar, but she'll also hold some for that Q&A session at the end. And this is Isabella and Caitlin, in case you can't see them in the small images, just wanted to make sure you guys can see them as well. So this is what's on our agenda tonight. We'll be chatting about all things Michigan Wetland Wonders. We're going to learn about the state of the birds, Michigan's important bird areas, and Michigan's Wetland Wonders, along with how you can get involved. And then we'll wrap things up with our Q&A session. So the state of the birds, as many of you may have seen, this report called the 3 Billion Birds Gone report came out back in 2019 that showed that we are seeing a pretty big decline in our North American bird species. So this report showed that we've lost 2.9 billion adult breeding birds since 1970. So that's about 1/4 of our adult breeding birds. And we saw declines across all habitat types and all guilds of birds. Grassland birds in particular, like our eastern meadowlarks that you can see here on the slide, have seen some of the steepest declines. Some of our favorite backyard bird feeders as well, or bird feed visitors, like the dark-eyed junco and white-throated sparrow in fall and winter, are also seeing steep population declines. A couple of months later, Audubon released our Survival by Degrees report, which showed that 389 bird species in North America are on the brink of extinction due to climate change. This study also showed us, however, that if we're able to limit warming to just 1.5 degrees Celsius as opposed to 3 degrees Celsius, we can help the chances of 76% of these bird species. And this is an example of a couple of my favorite Michigan species, the bobolink, a grassland bird, and the common loon that can be found in our lakes, inland lakes and Great Lakes during these beautiful summer months that we have coming up. And you can see how much of their range will be lost in red. And this is at a 3 degrees Celsius warming scenario. But again, there was a silver lining to that study, and there is a reason for hope. Each one of us matters, has a role to play, and makes a difference. I love Jane Goodall and all of her hopeful messages. And we saw that as well in the 3 Billion Birds report. There were some silver linings there too. When we're able to work together and have some concerted collaborative conservation efforts and policy and advocacy come together, we're able to really make a difference. We saw raptors bounce back from the brink of extinction thanks to the banning of DDT and increased environmental and wildlife protections in the 60s and 70s. So we saw bald eagles here in Michigan in particular, bald eagles, peregrine falcons, and osprey bounce back. Their populations really dwindled there in the 50s and 60s. We've also seen woodpecker populations increase, and this is primarily due to improved land management practices. For a long time, we were suppressing burning and disturbance in forest practices, but now we're increasing those burnings and disturbance, and also have a better understanding of snag retention, or keeping those dead trees around for these woodpeckers. Emerald ash borer beetle, while not great for our forests, it did cause a lot of damage that created a lot of habitat for woodpeckers as well. And finally, we saw waterfowl increase in population since 1970. And this is in great part due to waterfowl hunters who've been the leaders in wetlands conservation. Wetland conservation is of increasing concern here in the Great Lakes. We've lost half of our wetlands here in Michigan, and that's due to development or conversion to agriculture. But not all of our wetland birds are thriving. We still see that secretive marsh birds, for example, are still seeing steep declines in the Great Lakes region, and some of our waterfowl as well, even mallards are seeing some declines here in the Great Lakes. So that's one reason why we're really excited to talk to you about Michigan's Wetland Wonders tonight. These areas are considered Michigan's premier managed waterfowl hunt areas. So while these areas were created to provide exceptional waterfowl hunting opportunities, their management of creating this high quality wetland habitat really is beneficial for other wetland wildlife as well. And while these areas are funded by hunting license fees, they are actually free and open to the public to visit, use, and enjoy most of the year. So right now, we don't have any waterfowl seasons happening in spring and summer. It's a great time to get out and visit these wetland wonders. All of these wetland wonders also double as Audubon important bird areas. So important bird areas, this whole program with BirdLife International aims to bridge science with planning, advocacy, and engagement to protect areas important to birds all over the world. They have over 120 international partners, and Audubon is the BirdLife International partner for the United States. Audubon has worked with folks on the ground in state and regional offices, as well as chapters, to help identify important bird areas across the country. Here in Michigan, we have over 100 important bird areas, 10 of which are globally significant. So those are the important bird areas that are designated in red on the map here. All of the green important bird areas here are at state recognized important bird area priority level. And the important bird area program here in Michigan got started back in 2006 with the help of Kalamazoo Nature Center, Michigan Audubon, Detroit Audubon, and National Audubon. And they formed a technical committee that created a rigorous source of criteria that all of the important bird areas had to fall under, and developed this list of 103 important bird areas by 2010. So what does it mean if you have an important bird area? What does it take to become an important bird area? So important bird areas have to support a species of conservation concern. So those are our threatened or endangered species, a restricted range species, which is vulnerable because they're not widely distributed. So one of my favorite examples from back home, I'm from California originally, is a wren tit. They don't move or travel very far, and they're a very restricted range species. You also have habitat limited species, which are vulnerable because their populations are dependent on a specific habitat type or biome. So we have like wetland obligate species, like a lot of our vulnerable marsh birds. They are habitat limited. And then we also have congregatory species or groups of similar species that we see during migration, like flocks of waterfowl or shorebirds. And these birds are vulnerable because they occur at really high densities in just a few places. So if anything happened to one of those places where they occur at high densities, it could be detrimental to the population. So important bird areas can be found on public and private lands. But here in Michigan, over half of our important bird areas are public and owned and managed by Michigan DNR. So all of these areas are managed for multiple uses, and they're areas where a variety of bird species thrive across the state. And again, all of our wetland wonders that we're going to talk about tonight double as important bird areas. So they meet one or more of those four main criteria. So the first wetland wonder that I'd like to share with you is the Fennville Farm Unit at Allegan State Game Area. So this is out in Southwest Michigan. And this 4,100 acre Fennville Farm Unit sits within a larger 50,000 acre Allegan State Game Area. And Allegan State Game Area is a globally recognized important bird area. It's one of those that's known for its large number of vulnerable or management concern species. And it also has a regional source population for several area sensitive neotropical migrants. So that means that this is an area that supports populations of breeding migrants that are contributing to their population. So it's a source population. They're actually adding adult breeding birds and adding young fledglings to the population. So that makes that population even more important for the conservation of that species. We also see, as you can see in this photo, very high concentrations of Canada goose and mallard in the winter at Fennville Farm Unit. And over 140 species have been documented during breeding bird surveys here. So even getting out there in the summer provides a really great diversity of species that you can encounter and observe. So the Fennville Farm Unit, again, is this smaller area of the larger Allegan State Game Area. And these are the maps that you'll generally find for these wetland wonders that can be found online. And I just wanted to note, kind of go through what's on these maps, because again, these have been designed primarily for hunters, but if you're out there recreating or birding, it's helpful to just get familiar with what all of these icons mean. So the legend down here is really helpful. They have usually identified a headquarters office or an information kiosk. There are also parking lots accessible throughout the area. And some areas also have prepared ramps or boat launches with the little triangles. And at the top of each of these maps, there is contact information for the local field office or headquarters office for this particular wetland wonder. So here we have the Todd Farm DNR Wildlife Office and a phone number. So if you have any questions or about planning a visit, we definitely recommend reaching out to the local DNR staff to get to know what their recommendations are if you have questions about where you can or can't access. I do want to mention that within this unit and outside in the larger Allegan State Game Area, there is a really great diversity of habitats. This area is in an area where, like an ecotone, so it's where we have northern and southern hardwood forests mixed together, and usually in these areas where you have this transition zone, you have a lot of habitat diversity and then a lot of species diversity, and usually a lot of state conservation species of concern also kind of in these areas. So we definitely see that at Allegan State Game Area. At the Fenville Farm Unit in particular, it has become an eBird hotspot with over 2,500 checklists and 241 bird species detected there. Whereas the rest of the state game area only has 342 checklists, but still has 238 species detected. So still a lot of great diversity out there, but just not as heavily birded as the Fenville Farm Unit. So if you do plan to go out for a visit there, I encourage you to check out the Fenville Farm Unit and then also explore the rest of the game area since it has so much to offer. In addition to wildlife viewing and birding, this area also includes miles of nature trail hiking opportunities. And then I wanted to cover this as well. So this is on the back of every Wetland Wonder map, and it can be really intimidating to see that's a lot of text. This outlines the hunting regulations, specific rules and procedures, and this is generally for hunters during hunting season. The only thing that could be applicable to you at any other time of year is maybe some of the activities under the prohibited section at the bottom there. But as a birder, you are going to want to know when it's safe to go out, when waterfowl hunting seasons begin near you. And we'll drop a link in the chat about where you can find that information online. And again, if you would rather just speak to someone, you can definitely give that headquarters office a call to help you plan your visit. So Fenville Farm Unit also is a property that was originally used to grow peppermint, and then DNR purchased it in 1949, and it's still primarily farmed. They grow corn and a bunch of other crops that they then flood during the fall to help provide food to migrating waterfowl. And some shallow water wetlands have been developed there also in recent years to help with increased duck diversity. So there are some species of note that I'd like to share too, and this isn't just from eBird, this is from our important bird area report for the Fenville Farm Unit. And I won't read all of them, but I'll mention a few highlighted species. We have yellow-billed and black-billed cuckoo here, golden-winged warbler and blue-winged warbler, and cerulean warbler here. Louisiana water thrush and loggerhead shrike. Some of these are harder to find. Red-shouldered hawks and prothonotary warblers as well. And then eastern whippoorwills, one of my favorite birds to hear at night in the summertime. I recently reached out to somebody in Kent County who was looking for eastern whippoorwills, and this seems to be the closest location where you can get them out at Allegan State Game Area. So it's a great spot to explore during early mornings and evenings for different bird species. And this is one of those golden-winged warblers, one of those beauties. And that eastern whippoorwill. I love them. They are so unique. So the Fish Point State Wildlife Area is our next Wetland Wonder, and this one is in the Thumb in the Saginaw Bay area, and it is part of the globally recognized Saginaw Bay Important Bird Area. Saginaw Bay is also Michigan's largest watershed, and as you can imagine, an array of waterbird species use this area as a migratory stopover site, wintering ground, and breeding ground. What's really unique about this area and a couple of the others in that Saginaw Bay region is there are large migratory congregations of tundra swans, particularly in February and March. So early spring is a great time to get out to Fish Point if you want to look at those species, those large swans. They also get trumpeter swans up there. Other high density species that you can see in the hundreds up to the tens of thousands include American black ducks, mallards, as we have photographed here, redheads, common golden eyes, mergansers, common mergansers, and scops. So both greater and lesser can be found there, but in the tens of thousands. It's pretty amazing to see rafts of waterfowl that large out in the water. There are some important breeding birds as well that can be found at Fish Point. We have Caspian and common terns, which you'd be able to see now at this time of year and into June. And they're nesting there. So those are colonial water birds, and they're both state threatened species. We also have ring-billed gulls, great egrets, and black-crowned night herons that nest there, and those are all colonial water birds. It's also a great spot to view raptor migration, particularly in the spring, and for snowy owl viewing in the winter. It was actually where I saw my first snowy owl in Michigan, so it was great. In eBird, according to all of those checklists that have been submitted, over 2,000, they've observed 261 species. And this is an area that also provides other recreational opportunities outside of wildlife viewing and birding. You can go hiking and fishing. There are also nature trails available here, and you can do some paddling, canoeing, and kayaking. If you're also into wildlife photography, that's something that you can do at every Wetland Wonder. This Wetland Wonder as well, Fish Point, is part of the Saginaw Bay Birding Trail. So there are several other pit stops, and you can head out and make a day trip of it, visiting all the other pit stops in the Saginaw Bay Birding Trail. And that would actually probably take more than a day. It's a pretty large birding trail. And here's the map of the area. Again, they're the wildlife refuge areas that you wouldn't want to enter, but you can still walk around the perimeter. And there are dikes and ditches that you can walk along to get to some marshy habitat here along the shoreline, as well as observe a lot of these large congregatory species as well. The mallards and tundra swans can be found in some of the agricultural fields as well. And again, they have the contact information at the top and little headquarter office or kiosk, information kiosk, and a couple of areas to put in if you have a kayak or a canoe. So Harson's Island is the next Wetland Wonder, and that's out at St. Clair Flat State Wildlife Area, the Harson's Island unit. And this is part of the largest freshwater delta in the world. This is out in Southeast Michigan in Lake St. Clair. It's composed of approximately 25,000 acres of cattail, bulrush, and grasses with lots of open channels. And this is a state recognized important bird area. The rest of Lake St. Clair is also an important bird area. And it's highly important for breeding, migrating, and wintering waterfowl. It also supports really high densities of rare marsh nesting species, including the black tern. So this is a great photo. We have a nest here, and I'm just wanted to see if folks could see where the nest was in the cattail. This is a black tern nest, and it blends in really well. If you were in a boat paddling by, you might not see it. And the eggs themselves are also very closely colored to that dead cattail and bulrush, which is what they prefer to nest in. This is a site that we've been doing a lot of black tern conservation and research in partnership with Michigan DNR and Detroit Audubon, and we're doing some habitat work there as well. And this is an adult black tern. They are back at Harson's Island. We got word a couple of weeks ago from one of our marsh bird volunteers. And DNR field staff also spotted more of them last week. So very excited to have them back. Other rare marsh nesting species that you can find at Harson's Island include American and least bitterns, Forster's terns, which also nest there, marsh wrens, king rails, actually one of the historic breeding sites for king rails in the state, Virginia rail, Sora, purple martins, a lot of purple martins out there as well, and common gallinules. As far as what species you might see in really high concentrations during migration and also the winter months, that would be canvasbacks and tundra swans again. This area is also part of the new St. Clair-Macomb County Birding Trail and the Blue Ways of St. Clair Water Trail, which includes Michigan's first national water trail. So you can learn a little bit more about those birding trails and the Blue Ways water trail by checking out the links in the chat. It's another area that would be a great day trip, exploring some of those other pit stops along the birding trail or the water trail. So on eBird, you can see that there's a lot fewer checklists here than at Fish Point. There's only 758 checklists here and 223 species detected. So this area is underbirded compared to some of our other wetland wonders. And part of that is because a short auto ferry ride is required, or car ferry, to reach the island. So you have to take Champion's Auto Ferry. They're the only folks that take folks across to the island, and it's a $15 round trip ticket, but it's cash only. So that's really important to note because not many places are cash only anymore. But they run all day, at all hours of the day and night, every 15 minutes or so. So it's a really great place to have, again, a day trip where you can do wildlife viewing and birding, or hiking, as well as canoeing and kayaking. And here the headquarters office is located on Columbine Road. Again, phone number to speak with local field staff. And then they have these very large wetland units. Both of these are about 800 acres that you can walk around on the impoundments, and then you can view either from the impoundments or the roadsides a lot of this marsh as well in Little Muscamute Bay. If you don't have a kayak or boat yourself, you can still have a lot of really great viewing opportunities from the impoundments and roadsides and see a lot of great birds. So the next wetland wonder we're going to chat about is Muskegon County Resource Recovery Center. So this is formerly known as the Muskegon Wastewater System, which was a big eBird hotspot, still is. And this is state recognized as an important bird area and includes 11,000 acres of all of these different circular ponds that you can see here. So some of them are for aeration, for water treatment or settling or spraying areas. And they include lagoons or just open water. There's some dikes and impoundments throughout here as well, and fields. So even though you tend to go to a wastewater area for water birds or waterfowl, there is a good amount of grassland habitat here. So it's a great spot to view grassland birds as well in the summer. And it is adjacent to Muskegon State Game Area, which is just up the road. And the headquarters office there, those are the folks that manage the waterfowl hunt here in the County Resource Recovery Center. So here at the Resource Recovery Center, the reason this area is designated as an important bird area is because it supports a really large diversity and abundance of migrating waterfowl and shorebirds. So for shorebirds, it's particularly the semi-palmated sandpipers. These little guys that look a lot like piping plovers. So this is a good one to learn the difference of. And then also northern shovelers, one of my favorites. This is an Audubon Photography Award-winning photo that was actually taken at the Muskegon County Recovery Center. So they also have very high densities like this of ruddy ducks. You can see them in the hundreds to thousands there in the fall or early spring. And the grass fields, I did mention the grasslands there, south of Apple Avenue are really excellent for upland sandpiper, short-eared owl, those grassland sparrows that we all love, and hawks. So on eBird, there are just over 11,000 checklists, which is a lot. This is definitely an eBirding hotspot with 280 species detected. And nearby, we have Muskegon State Game Area's Lane's Landing, which is getting up there in its species count as well, 229 species with just over 1,000 checklists on eBird. So this is another area that's just adjacent to a big birding hotspot that can still offer a lot of really great species diversity that you can check out the next time you go to the resource center for a tour. We do have an upcoming chapter that will be hosting, I know, a bird walk here that we'll be sharing on our My Birds Facebook page. And I believe that will be sometime in August. So stay tuned if you want to participate in a guided tour of the area. Species of note as well, we have the grasshopper sparrow here. That is a breeding bird, as well as bald eagles. Lots of lesser yellowlegs are seen here as well during migration. Northern shovelers and ruddy ducks, as we mentioned, those short-eared owls, which are always really amazing to see. We also have trumpeter swan, Wilson's pharaoh, dunlins, another shorebird that you might not see too often. Dick Sissels, another grassland bird, and eared grebes and common loons have actually been seen breeding here in the past. So those are some fun species you might be able to spot heading out there later this month or in June or July. So we're going to jump back over to the Saginaw Bay area, to Nyanquin Point State Wildlife Area. This is a state recognized important bird area in and of itself. But it also falls within that larger globally recognized Saginaw Bay important bird area. This area is also part of that Saginaw Bay birding trail that I mentioned that Fish Point is also a part of. And this area has over 4,000 eBird checklists with 272 species detected. I wanted to mention that if you did want to do a day trip to visiting Fish Point and Nyanquin, there is a third wildlife area, just another half hour or so north, called Wigwam Bay State Wildlife Area, which is another state recognized important bird area that's just south of Tawas Point. And that area only has 127 eBird checklists compared to the 4,000 and I think over 10,000 that Tawas Point has. And 185 species detected there. But that's one of those other areas that is a really beautiful spot, a beautiful managed waterfowl hunt area that offers a lot of really great viewing opportunities and paddling opportunities and hiking opportunities that isn't on a lot of birders' radar. Nyanquin Point itself has a really great accessible viewing platform at the end of Kitchen Road. So that's been updated recently and is now wheelchair accessible. So that is a really great viewing deck. You can get really great views out over the mud flats here, as well as East Marsh, and see a lot of really great species. So Nyanquin Point is composed of coastal marsh, managed marsh, so that impounded marsh, as well as some agricultural cropland that we mentioned. They do some ag here to flood and feed waterfowl. And while it's only 1,500 acres in size, much smaller than a lot of the other areas we've been talking about so far, it provides such high quality, diverse habitat that we still see really high concentrations of migratory birds and wetland wildlife here. So it's a really great bang for your buck site. And you can see really high concentrations of tundra swans here, like you can at Fish Point, and Allegan and Greater Scop, as well as a plethora of diving duck species. So those are the ones where you'll get those really big rafts of canvasbacks and buffleheads into the 20,000s, which is amazing to see in person. And that's during spring and fall migration in particular. Lesser scop is most abundant in spring versus greater scop in the fall. And winter and spring up through about April, and maybe you'll be lucky with May. We've had some late snowy owl sightings here as well. It's another good spot for snowy owls. A lot of these wetland wonders tend to attract snowy owls when they're down here for the winter. My favorites to see in the wintertime. So for the summer months, the next couple of months, birds that you might be able to see up at Nyanquin include breeding American and least bitterns, breeding redhead ducks, common gallinules, Forster's terns, and yellow-headed blackbirds. This is a site that is known for being able to see yellow-headed blackbirds during migration, but they are also known to breed there. And in addition to wildlife viewing and birding here. Nyanquing and Wigwam state wildlife areas offer hiking, fishing, trapping, and kayaking and canoeing opportunities. So these are the species of note from our important bird area report for this site. We have some of the ducks that you would expect: gadwall, American black duck, American coot, but then we also have some other birds like American pipits and tree sparrows that can be seen in high numbers here. Those black-bellied plovers that you can see during migration, and horned larks, Lapland longspur, Henslow sparrows in the areas of this wildlife area that have more grassland habitat. And then we also have willet and long-tailed duck and mallard that you can see in pretty high concentrations. So we're going to shoot south now to Point Mouillet State Game Area in Southeast Michigan, the lower Southeast Michigan. And while this area is a state recognized important bird area, it also falls within the globally recognized Detroit River important bird area. Point Mouillet is a premier Michigan wetland of really key significance to water birds, waterfowl, and shorebirds. This is a site that has really impressive diversity and high counts, and these are a few examples that we have, again, based on our important bird area report. Tundra swans, over 1,000 individuals, redheads, over 5,000 individuals, wood ducks, 400, canvasbacks, 11,000. And then you have some great opportunities for shorebird viewing here, particularly during fall migration, which for shorebirds kicks off in mid to end July. So it's a great spot to see lesser yellowlegs and short-billed dowitchers. There are also some great shorebirds nesting there, like American avocet and black-necked stilts. It's definitely one of the Great Lakes' top shorebird stopovers. And for a few years there, when we had really high water, there wasn't a lot of great shorebird habitat here, but that started to shift again, and we're starting to see more over the last couple of years show back up again, which has been really great. So the Point Mouillet State Game Area is a really huge wetland complex here, and while it does include Celeron and Stony Islands, most of the places that you'll have access to are going to be here in this refuge unit and the main unit with these wetland, impounded wetland areas. And then there's some not impounded wetland out here at the mouth of the Huron River. So this area is one of the reasons it is such a great spot. It is at the mouth of the Huron River where it meets Lake Erie. The site itself is also one of the largest freshwater marsh restoration projects in the world, and it hosts an annual waterfowl festival each fall. So if you haven't been to that waterfowl festival, I highly recommend it. It is usually promoted online and on Facebook. Michigan DNR participates, of course, and is a host and shares information about how you can get involved. It's also a new field trip location for America's Biggest Week in Birding, and they just wrapped up that Biggest Week in Birding last week with a few field trips out to Point Mouillet. And our local Audubon chapter, Detroit Audubon, tends to host a series of guided birding tours at Point Mouillet as well. So I recommend following them to learn about when their next guided tour is if you're interested in participating in a guided tour. Point Mouillet is a great spot, again, for a really diverse amount of recreational opportunities. Here you can actually ride a bike on the impoundment system, as well as jog or hike and walk. You also have access to put-ins, so you can go kayaking or canoeing. And it offers the dikes themselves while you're walking or on your bike, great viewing and birding opportunities. It's just wonderful out there. It is very exposed, so make sure a lot of these areas are being wetlands, so make sure you layer up and have sunscreen and hats and water and all that jazz before you head out. One thing to note that I meant to mention is that not all of these areas have restrooms on site. So that's definitely something you might want to call ahead and ask about. Parsons Island, St. Clair Flats, there are restrooms at the headquarters office. And that's kind of all I know at the moment. There might be others, but that's the one I know for sure has restrooms. So with Point Mouillet State Game Area, it got added to America's Biggest Weekend Birding. So you can think, yes, it is definitely a big eBird hotspot. It's gotten a lot of attention in the media over the last few years as well, because it's a really great location for rare vagrants. So vagrants are bird species that end up far outside of their normal range. That really usually draw a lot of birders, the birders that are really excited to see a species and add it to their list that they probably wouldn't be able to see otherwise. So some of those vagrants include, we had cinnamon teal there, we had common redshank, and a few other really great species just in the last couple years. So it's a great spot to keep your eyes peeled for something you might not be expecting to see. And it's also great to just see all of these other wetland species that we really don't see in a lot of other places in Michigan, like glossy ibis and white-faced ibis. Those can be seen pretty frequently at Point Mouillet. Whimbrels, least bitterns are very difficult to see because they're so secretive, but we've had them there. Black-crowned night herons as well. And then again, a lot of these diving ducks and dabbling ducks that can be found there in really big numbers, and merlins during raptor migration and sometimes breeding there as well. And our next wetland wonder is Shiawassee River State Game Area. And this is a state recognized important bird area that adjoins the Shiawassee National Wildlife Refuge. So this and that wildlife refuge make up a really large contiguous wetland complex. And it's partly why this area is an important bird area along with the Shiawassee Wildlife Refuge. It just draws in combined so many waterfowl species and wetland reliant species, these vulnerable marsh birds that we are so interested in surveying and monitoring. So it's another great site to visit if you haven't been before, or if you've only been to the nearby Shiawassee National Wildlife Refuge. This is another spot that again is not as frequented by birders, but is accessible to them and has a lot of great viewing opportunities. So here, while only 185 species have been detected so far, that's only with 128 checklists on eBird, whereas the nearby Shiawassee Wildlife Refuge has over 250 bird species detected with over 2,500 checklists. So it's a much more heavily birded area. So this is the map for the state game area for Shiawassee. A lot of areas to hike and walk on. A lot of these impoundments you can get around to see wetlands as well as some upland habitat and some of that deciduous woodlands. And in addition to wildlife viewing and birding here, you can again go fishing, canoeing, kayaking here, do some nature trail hiking as well, and biking and jogging opportunities. There are annual stewardship days hosted at Shiawassee River State Game Area as well, in partnership with Michigan United Conservation Club. Usually there's a winter wood duck nest box building workshop, and you go out and clean out the old nest boxes as well. So that's a great one to keep your eyes peeled for. We usually share those on our My Birds page. And sometimes they do some habitat work as well. So some species of note, a lot of our diving and dabbling ducks in, again, very large concentrations during migration. And then a lot of these species also breed here at Shiawassee. So we have gadwall, American bittern, American black duck, and widgeon. We have northern pintail and shoveler, redheads, ringneck ducks, buffleheads, canvasbacks, and more. So if none of those 7 wetland wonders are near you, there are another 7 managed waterfowl hunt areas in the state that you can explore. And all 14 of these areas double as Audubon important bird areas. Pretty much all of these sites, I think all of them, just checking and confirming the list, are areas where we currently have monitors looking for black terns. So how are wetland wonders and important bird areas funded? Audubon doesn't have the capacity to support important bird area conservation outright. And so important bird areas and Audubon rely on partners, the landowners and managers of these important bird areas. So in Michigan, this primarily falls on the shoulders of DNR. As we saw, they own and manage over half of our important bird areas in the state. And all of our wetland wonders and managed waterfowl hunt areas are managed specifically by the Wildlife Division. So the Wildlife Division makes up 10% of the larger DNR budget, as you can see here. And that 10% is very much reliant on hunter monies. So 90% of that Wildlife Division budget comes from hunter dollars in the form of their hunting and fishing license fees, as well as the excise taxes on firearms and ammunition from the Pittman-Robertson Act. So there aren't a lot of other funding pathways or sources for the Wildlife Division, which is starting to become an issue, a larger conservation issue, because hunting has been in decline since the 1990s. So in Michigan, we're seeing some increases in hunting, particularly in younger women, but it's not enough to offset the overall decline. And this means that the Wildlife Division is working with a smaller budget every year. And one of the biggest threats to these important bird areas is invasive species and being able to manage them and remove them. So how can you get involved? We have a few calls to action, and then we'll be wrapping things up with the Q&A. So ways for birders to support these areas. Again, like I mentioned, there aren't a lot of funding pathways. A lot of birders on our field trips always ask me how they can help when we start discussing this funding framework for the Wildlife Division. And right now, there are just these few ways that you can support them, though we are looking at some other options. So first on the list is purchasing a migratory duck stamp. While this goes towards federal dollars that are used to purchase wetlands for wetlands acquisition, that's still really helpful overall for wetlands conservation in the region. You can also donate to Michigan's Non-Game Fish and Wildlife Trust Fund. We'll be putting some links in the chat on where you can find this information. With them, the only way to donate is to actually send a check. And then you can also donate to an Adopt a Game Area program. And while that's focused mostly on grassland habitat, which is causing the loss of grassland habitat is causing the steepest population decline in grassland birds compared to any other group of birds. There are some of our wetland wonders on their list as well, because a lot of these wetland wonders also have some grassland habitat. So there's still a way you can donate to some of these areas through that program. You can also volunteer to be a community scientist. We do have black tern surveys at a lot of these wetland wonders and managed waterfowl hunt areas, as well as marsh bird surveys. Or you can also be a steward at your local public lands and get involved with MUCC or DNR stewardship days. We also encourage you to engage with the Wetland Wonders strategic planning effort. So that's something that is new as of a couple of years ago. So our Wetland Wonders are undergoing a new strategic planning effort by a work group at DNR. Caitlin is sitting on that work group, and it's been charged with developing a 10-year strategic plan to define priorities for both hunting and non-hunting recreation, as well as habitat management of these wetland wonders. So the new plan hopes to provide management consistency between the areas while also recognizing their uniqueness. So there is a new survey out that we will send your way for public input. If you're interested in providing input on the strategic planning of these areas for the next 10 years, definitely click on that link, and we'll be sending that out as well in a follow-up email. Excuse me. We also have the following upcoming opportunities. Saturday, June 3rd, we have the Blue Water Sturgeon Festival up at Port Huron. Sorry about that, where My Birds, myself, and our partners Detroit Audubon will be tabling and presenting on our black tern work at St. Clair Flats. On June 10th, we'll be out at Muskegon State Game Area leading a birding tour with our My Birds ambassadors, Awashtenaung Islands Audubon Society, excuse me, and Muskegon County's Nature Club. That afternoon, we'll also be working with our partners at the Lower Grand River Organization of Watersheds annual kayak and paddle trip, which is along the Grand River. So we'll be looking for birds while we're paddling out there. And then on Saturday, June 17th, there's going to be a spring open house at St. Clair Flat State Wildlife Area on Harson's Island. And you'll be able to see Caitlin there and some of our other colleagues. And then again, I mentioned stewardship opportunities with the Michigan DNR and MUCC. They have events throughout the year. And with that, I'll open things up for some questions and pass things over to Caitlin.
Okay, so I think we were able to answer a lot of them as we went. But Erin, there was a question about, are other properties in the IBA, such as those owned by land conservancies or the Nature Conservancy? And I'll drop them into the chat as I reread them.
Great, thanks, Caitlin. Yes, there are the other half of the important bird areas in Michigan are owned by a variety of different organizations, some of which include federal government, Fish and Wildlife Service, Forest Service, excuse me, as well as the Land Conservancy folks, in addition to Michigan Audubon, who has their own set of sanctuaries.
Perfect. And then before I ask the next question, could you click back to the full state map with all the 14 birding sites on it for folks?
Sure, yeah. Here we go.
All right. And the next question was, what measures are taken to determine cryptic marsh bird populations? Because they are cryptic, are population counts based in presence data, or are there assumed numbers based on calculating territory or carrying capacity?
That's a great question. So I know Michigan Natural Features Inventory leads a set of secretive marsh bird surveys at different routes across the state, and that has limited coverage. We also have breeding bird surveys that happen each season, and while those are not specific to secretive marsh birds, so there's like an asterisk there with the breeding bird survey, you might miss detections just because of their nature. And because of that, at the areas that we at Audubon Great Lakes are working at with Michigan DNR and other partners, we are doing additional secretive marsh bird monitoring with the help of volunteer community scientists, following an audio playback survey protocol. So that's specific to marsh birds. It happens just before sunrise and allows us to have the most accurate detections. And that is based on abundance as opposed to calculating out or modeling out a potential population based on carrying capacity.
And kind of to piggyback off of that one, this question just came in. asking if there's a source for current or new sightings, that after 40 years, one of our attendees has been very puzzled by a new large and loud visitor.
Oh. I would say, as far as new records go, exploring those eBird checklists. There are some species that are protected in that sense. So, for example, Virginia rail, you won't be able to see specific locations about where they're seen on eBird. The same goes for other state endangered species or federally endangered species, but that would be your best bet for updated records.
Perfect. And I've had this asked a couple times now, whether or not there is a list of IBA areas, both public and private, that are open to the public. I did share kind of the dashboard where you can explore, but that's not so much of a static list. It kind of depends on the scale. So for folks that did click that, I'll drop it again. You can zoom in and out, and depending on what scale you're zoomed in or out at, it'll list them on the right-hand side. But Aaron, I don't know if you know of a just standalone list of those.
The dashboard replaced our standalone list. So yeah, that's all we have to work with right now.
Perfect. And then the last question we had was, I think, again, regarding important bird areas. And someone was curious about the raptor flyway over Brockway Mountain in the Keweenaw Peninsula. And I just kind of suggested that maybe you might talk about what what boxes need to be checked to be considered an important bird area, and if that might explain why some areas are or are not included.
Yeah, so with that, it is mostly thinking about the congregatory species, how many are there, how many you see flying over. We do have another kind of hawk watch type area out at Lake Erie Metro Park that is an important bird area. And usually it's one or more of those 4 criteria. So again, either sensitive species of conservation concern are present or supported by that site, or they're restricted species, or habitat reliant species.
Perfect. And then so another question came in, whether there are plans on creating any new wetland wonders in the state of Michigan. There are not right now. There are no new plans to create new ones, just to kind of focus efforts on managing the ones we have. That's not to say, we're constantly looking to acquire properties. That's always something that local biologists are watching. So it's totally possible that if we were to acquire more land, that we could end up with additional wetland wonders. And I just saw one more question. Oh, where do you sign up for the outings? I believe that's probably referring to our open houses. And you don't need to sign up for those. You can just come on out. We can host as many people as want to arrive. So there will be some more detailed information going out here as we nail down some details. So.
Yeah, and I think I didn't mention that starts or plans to start at 9 a.m. on June 17th. And I can create a Facebook page on the MyBirds page for that open house. So folks, if you want to learn more information, once all the details get nailed down, you can check back at MyBirds and we'll have that information posted.
It looks like I just saw one more come in. Let's see, we've got another minute. Asking if we offer guided hikes. Mostly not on an individual basis. If folks stop in at any of our areas, staff are happy to suggest places to check out. No one's trying to hide information, so we're happy to tell people, where we're seeing things or where they're gonna have the best shot at finding the birds they're looking for. But the open houses, we are there to, try to open up the area to folks to go check those out. So we don't necessarily guide them, but we do have staff, at least at Harson's Island, spread out on the area as kind of touch points to guide people. So not kind of a one-on-one, but there is some guidance, at least at the open houses, and you're more than welcome to stop in to talk to staff anytime that we're available at the areas.
And I will say, in the past, DNR and MyBirds have hosted spring birding tours at these areas. That was put on pause during COVID, and there's some staffing being spread thin, so we haven't brought those back yet. But I am hoping to, at least personally for my birds, get one or more on the calendar for each spring. So just keep your eyes peeled for that. And again, these open houses are also coming back for spring and fall. So we'll be sharing that information out as well. And there could be more coming. So we'll just keep you posted. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for spending this last hour with us. I really hope you think this was helpful information. Again, we'll follow up with an email with a recording of this webinar, along with some of those links we shared in the chat. And we hope you all have a great rest of your evening and hope to see you out in the field at some point. All right, take care, everyone. Bye. All right, bye, y'all.